allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Taxes in today's tax day.
So with that said, Dave, you want to go ahead and take over? Did the other commissioners want to take a comment?
We ready? Everybody ready? It's a beautiful morning for budgets.
Okay. So,
now, there's only 12 slides of content here, so this may not take me longer than 45 minutes or so of your time. Your time is valuable. We don't want to waste your time. I'll give you an overview, but on the other hand, if there's lots of questions, we can be here as long as it takes. Or if there's any follow-up questions you want to address to either me at extension 60 to 69 or the real expert on the budget, Heidi Delaney, 1664. Yeah, feel free at any time because part of what we're trying to do here is improve the transparency and the openness of government and maybe address some of the, well, they call them urban legends, but this is Geauga County, so maybe country legends about the budget, about the money, about money we have or money we don't have. Also in the audience are two of our key money people in the county, Auditor Frank Leah, who processes all the money through his financial system, does the CAFR and all the financial reports. The Commissioner's Office does the budget, but the Auditor's Office does the heavy lifting in terms of processing all the checks and handling encumbrances and running the New World system. So it's a big job. We appreciate what Auditor Leah does. Treasurer Chris Hitchcock's in the back. He receives in the money. So that's the other part of the equation. There's a lot of money that flows through the county. Comes into the county treasury and goes out through the auditor's office. All the money for all the schools, all the villages, the city of Chardon, the 16 townships, the Park District, Health District, Geauga-Trumbull Solid Waste District. There's a lot of money that flows through the county. What we're going to talk about today primarily is the part that goes through the Commissioner's office and the Commissioner's budget. So why are we here today? Well, we want to start off the budgeting season. Generally, I send out a memo to everyone saying, we need you to start putting in your tax budget information, and we need you to hold the guidelines for salaries and benefits and whatnot. And every year I say the same thing. We got to tighten our belts. I think over time, maybe that's kind of worn some people. I've been doing this. This is my 11th year of doing this, and maybe it's getting a little stale. So we want to kind of use this to bring a little reality to the discussion so that you understand where we're coming from. We want to talk about budget issues in advance. We want to talk about the possibility of a 5-year budget. Now, this would be a planning budget. Just like the schools, I guess, are required to do a 5-year planning budget. And the advantage of that is, if you're looking farther out and you see something that may happen that may be a problem, you have more time to react to it, so the corrective action is not as burdensome as it can be if you're only planning 1 year out. So we're just going to put that out there and say that's something we think might be appropriate. We're going to talk about long-term planning for capital projects and debt financing. Most well-run counties I've studied, and I've studied a few, do this on a religious, regular basis. And I think that's a best practice we have to think about doing. We're going to talk about a county-wide salary profile, some sort of an objective analysis of job positions so that we have some sort of uniformity on positions, where the positions are common around multiple hiring authorities, just to bring up the idea. And we certainly want to get your feedback and suggestions going forward. Okay, budget guidelines. When we talk about the budget, we're almost always focusing on the general fund. The county budget, let's first of all define the county budget from the commissioner's standpoint. It's easier to say what county agencies aren't in the commissioner's budget than to start listing all the ones that are. The Park District is not in the Commissioner's budget. The Health District is not in the Commissioner's budget. The Geauga County Library System is not in the commissioner's budget. And this may be confusing to some people because in a lot of states, all those entities would be in the commissioner's budget, but by Ohio law, they're not in Geauga County Commissioner's budget. The overall budget is usually averages around $120 million a year. We're on a calendar year, as you all know. Out of that, the general fund is usually close to $30 million, or about a quarter of the overall budget. So why do we focus on the general fund? Well, because there's over 100 funds in the commissioner's budget, and except for the general fund, these are for narrowly defined purposes, defined by ORC. You know, mental health, DD, Department on Aging, Children's Services, Engineers, Road Tax Levy. These are all specific purposes, so there's not a whole lot of discretion on how that money is spent. The general fund is the one area where the commissioners have to make some hard choices, and they have the ability to prioritize things from year to year. So that's really why we want to focus on that. The other reason we want to focus on that is the general fund is kind of the barometer of the overall county's health or ability to handle certain things, like salary increases, like benefits costs and things like that. So we try to peg everything to the general fund. So that's, again, our emphasis. So we're going to be talking here mainly about the general fund. What we're going to be doing is going over a couple of common topics that people look at every year. We're going to be looking at our revenue history from 2008, which was kind of before the crash, to the present, to see where we're at. We're going to be looking at expenditures during that same period of time. We're going to be talking a little bit about debt financing, and then we're going to be talking about what's the path forward. So that's kind of the outline of where we're going. So in doing budgeting, at least if you're conservative, and I think we're all pretty much conservative people around here, you try to estimate your revenues low, so you don't have bad surprises, and you think you're going to get more money than you actually get. You try to estimate your expenses high, and hopefully what you estimate will not be what you actually spend. So all the surprises hopefully are positive. A good rule of thumb that a lot of well-run counties follow is you don't budget to spend more than you expect to receive. Now, we're not really able to do that here because of our limitations on our resources. So what we're doing is we're doing a budget every year that takes the revenues, but also takes that beginning carryover and plans to spend it all. So that's like a household saying, okay, the family income is $80,000 and we got $4,000 sitting in the savings account, so we're going to budget to spend the whole $84,000. Obviously, if you did that all the time, you'd run out of money. So, but that's the goal, is to try to not budget more than you're going to receive. We have a concept or a philosophy of trying to maintain consistency and objectivity and fairness to all, especially in regards to compensation. So that's why generally every year, based on the commissioner's input or the commissioner's direction, because this is their call, certainly not budget people, we put in a recommended salary increase, and that's by hiring authority or by department. That's department-wide. Where commissioners are not micromanaging what individual people are paid. They're just saying, if there's a salary guideline of 3%, we're going to look at last year's final budget for that department for salaries. We're going to add 3% to that, and that's going to be what they have to spend. And with retirement and turnover and things like that, hopefully the elected official or department head can reward people adequately, within our constraints. Finally, if we're going to look at capital projects, which is typically one of the things we talk about at budget hearing time, we have to look at the business case. We have to look at ROI, and we'll be talking about a couple of projects as we go through here as examples of how that's driven. If anybody has a question along the way, and for whatever reason they want to ask it, just ask it. Like, this is supposed to be very informal. I don't want to just be lecturing here. So, any questions come up, please ask. All right, this is just this slide is just intended to talk about when people say, "Ooh, the general fund has a $7.5 million carryover." Boy, they got a lot of money. This is an example to show you where that money goes or how that works. This is our actual numbers for the beginning of 15. So the cash balance, what was in the checkbook, was $7,426,000. Out of that, you take out your carryover encumbrances, your POs, because that's money already spent. So now you're down to $6.7 million. This is where it gets tricky for some people. In our permanent appropriation,
Dave, sorry to interrupt. I don't know, and I don't want to speak down to anybody, but you might want to define terms that are,
Yeah.
that you understand completely, because this is what you do. There may be somebody in this room that doesn't understand what an encumbrance is.
Right.
And so you might want to define some terms as we go. I don't know. Maybe I'm being stupid here, I don't know.
No.
Just for the sake of some folks in the room.
yeah, no, I'm happy.
The only way to spend money is encumbered.
It's a purchase order. Yeah, you can't spend the money unless you've already set it aside. Because in a department, a lot of people spending money, if you didn't have purchase orders, you'd have multiple people trying to spend the same dollar, and that wouldn't work out.
Yeah, basically an encumbrance is a commitment on that money. It's not spent yet, it's a commitment to spend the money. And so it is, it's set aside, as you would say.
Absolutely, thank you. That's good. Okay, so the number here that sometimes gets people a little confused is, well, now we're going to deduct out of that 6.7, which is still a lot of money, but now we're going to take $4.5 million away from that. Well, why would we do that? Well, the permanent appropriation that was made by the commissioners in December was based on the Budget Commission's last certificate of resources. For those of you who don't know, the Budget Commission is comprised of Mr. Geauga, Mr. Hitchcock, and Mr. Flakes, the auditor, the treasurer, and the prosecutor. And they're the ones who, by Ohio law, certify the money available to be spent. And you can't appropriate the money until the Budget Commission has certified the money. Okay. So we do an estimate and say, worst case, we're going to have $4.5 million carryover at the beginning of the year. So we put that in the budget, and that's certified by the Budget Commission. So we have to take that $4.5 million out of the 6.7 because that's already accounted for. That's already the permanent appropriation. So you can't count it twice. Okay, so then you take that away, you're able to add, in this case, for this year, about $135,000 where the Budget Commission took a final look at revenue estimates and said, we're going to have a little more money than we originally thought back in August when we last looked at this. So now that means the actual unappropriated balance at the beginning of January was a little bit under $2,400,000. I'm going to come back here to transfers out and just cover two other things. Contingency. We have in there to put $450,000 into our contingency fund. That's because the permanent appropriation that was adopted in December had $300,000 in contingency. And we want to get our contingency account back to $750,000. By law, we can't designate any more than 3% of the general fund for contingency, and $750,000 is somewhat under that. So we use that number. And the slide to follow will be a brief discussion on contingency, because that's another question people bring up. It's like, why do you have this big contingency account here? What are you doing, soccer away money? Yeah, but there's a reason. At the beginning, right after the beginning of the year, once we knew the carryover, the commissioners had already agreed on about $42,000 worth of supplemental appropriations. The issue we have this year is we have a lot of requests for funding, and we don't have enough money to fund it all, and have a contingency where we think it should be based on past experience. So the balance of the money we put in transfers out, but there's a lot more in transfers out than that. We have $500,000 that was put into transfers out for debt retirement, and we have $550,000 that was put in to fund a new self-storage structure for the county engineer. This comes back to return on investment. The county engineer came and talked to the commissioners, and there's a compelling reason why you want a structure big enough to, when you can buy large amounts of road salt in the middle of the summer when it's really cheap. There's a reason to do that as opposed to having a limited structure and having to buy salt in the winter when it's very expensive. But that cash has been put in there, but you'll see as part of our debt financing plan, we may be putting that into financing later on in the year. But for now, we had to get it in place because the engineer had to get started with his salt storage structure. So that, those two numbers alone, the debt retirement and the salt structure is about $1 million and $1.9 million. And maybe Heidi, you can speak to some of those.
We have, we typically put about $100,000 in the capital account. That's for Glenn to do projects around the county, and some of you have been involved in those. We have funding for grant matches that we do for the county. So if someone comes to session and they're applying for a grant and there's a local match, that's also where we would put transfers out. And some of our fundings for some of the departments under the hiring authority that the county owns, it's funding from the general fund, so that would be also been transferred out.
Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. So let's go on to the next slide, which is, and again, I apologize for the visibility of some of these slides. That's why we got handouts. So you can look, and you'll see it gets worse later on in the presentation. There's no way you can actually see this on the screen. This is all data we thought you might be able to see. This is our history on the contingency account since 2007. And the first column, if you have your handout, you can see is the total amount that was appropriated that year. You see in 2008, things were still relatively good from a county perspective, so we got a little more in there, and there may be something else we put in there that year.
From the workers' comp.
Oh, we swept the, that's right, okay, there was an excess in workers' comp there. Okay, and then the second column is what was transferred every year, what was used up every year. And that leaves you a balance. So on average, from 07 to 14, the average we had left in contingency was $208,000 out of an average of, you can see, generally around $750,000. So we used the money. I'll point out in 2013, we had $750,000, and we transferred $606,000, and $294,000 of that, right? $294,000 of that was transferred in August or late August of 2013, because that was at the point when the Board of County Commissioners felt like there had to be strong action taken to address the heroin issue. So we had a meeting and we asked departments, hey, what do you need in terms of additional funding to effectively address this issue? The request came back to $294,000, and because we have a contingency account, we were able to fund that. And that was about half of that $606,000 that we transferred. And I mean, Heidi can give you examples of given years of how that money is used. One of the ways it's typically used, the Sheriff's Department, in their budget, they budget for normal operations, normal salaries, benefits, hours, and all that. And then activities come up where they can be reimbursed for special activities that'll take manpower, take resources that are not in their budget. So they get the okay to conduct those activities, and then they're reimbursed. In order to make them whole on their budget, we receive that money in. The reimbursement comes into the county fund. It doesn't go to the sheriff, it comes into the general fund, it becomes part of our overall balance. We turn around a contingency and make them whole. So that's kind of a routine thing every year. It usually doesn't comprise the majority of the transfers out, but that's probably what most of the volume is for those kind of activities. Okay. All right. These slides will go relatively quickly unless you have any questions. We're going to talk about revenue first. This is just to tell you what we typically receive our money from. Again, this is the general fund. You can see real estate taxes and sales taxes combined are about 3/4 of what we get. The sales taxes, we'll talk about a little later, is a wonderful source of revenue, but again, it can turn around in an instant if you have a recession or a depression. It's not money you're going to be able to count on. We can budget out 5 years and assume there's going to be like an inflationary growth in sales tax, but you never know. And interesting things come up, like sometimes, this is something else to go back to the contingency. A couple years ago, we got a letter from the state of Ohio. Oh, by the way, you were getting sales tax on this big box store that turned out wasn't in Geauga County. So we got to take $600,000 back from you. Have a nice day. And where does that money come from? Well, it comes out of contingency. Now, they allowed us to pay that back over a couple of years, but I think it was revenue over...
It was 4 years it happened, and then they allowed us 2 years to pay it back.
Yeah. Yeah, so you get those nice little surprises that just pop up and you have to deal with. So, does anybody have any questions on the sources of revenue on the pie chart? This is my favorite slide. Prepare to be bored. There's coffee in the back if you'd like to get some right now, because I'm going to talk about this for a little bit until someone comes up here and one of these guys drags me on. This is a stacked bar chart, or stacked bar. This shows, and if you got your head on, you can see it. 2008 actual revenue was $28.4 million, but actually it was $29.9 million. Why, you ask? Well, back then, because we had built the safety center, incurred debt, the commissioners and the auditor at the time had agreed that they should take the inside millage going in the general fund from property taxes, 2.5 mils. Said, take $500,000, put it right in the debt retirement. That's $1.5 million. So it's like, you got a mortgage, you know you got to pay it every month. I don't even want to see that money. Don't put it in my paycheck, just take it out. It doesn't even show my income. So this 28.4 doesn't include the 1.5 million that was going into debt retirement. Okay. And you see our revenue dropped dramatically in 2009. This is when, early in 2009, we were getting about, in 2008, I think we got about $2 million in prisoner housing revenue in our new jail. 2009, early on, the county said, oh, by the way, we're not going to send you prisoners anymore. The money's shutting off. So if you look at, if you can see on your handout, that, as Heidi refers to it, that prisoner jumpsuit orange slice there in 2008, pretty good size. And then in 2009, it gets really small, and in 10, 11, it pretty much goes away. We lost all that prisoner housing revenue because the people that were using our jail suddenly didn't have the money to house prisoners in Geauga County. So we lost that. That was one reason revenue went down. Interest rates started to go down, or interest income started to go down, a host of different things. Sales tax fell off. So a host of things happened to cause revenue to drop. Okay, so in 2010, the commissioners went to the auditor and said, oh, that $500,000 we're putting away for debt retirement, we need that back in the general fund. So that now shows, that's what we call millage shift, shifted back to the general fund. That shows, and is now reflected in those total numbers. Okay. Everybody following this so far? All right. So, if you say the actual number in 2008 was 29.9 million, what have we got in 14? 29.1 million. We are down $800,000 from 14 compared to 8. So, folks, when we say you got to tighten the belt because we don't have the money, it's because we don't have the money that we had in 2008. And then take into account inflation over that period of time. Compounded inflation over that period of time, what, 15%? We've lost 15% of value of the money we're getting. So this is reality. We're not crying wolf. This is reality. Okay. And what I say here is, if you forget about the fact we're not automatically socking money away for debt retirement. We, like I said before, we put $500,000, but that's a thing we have to do every year, subject to the availability to spend it. So we're not putting $1.5 million away. We voluntarily transfer $500,000 typically to keep up with our payments, which we'll cover in another slide. So our revenue, if you disregard this millage shift thing, the actual number, 29.1 versus 28.4, over time that's 2.5% increase. That's way below inflation. So we'll get to the expense side now, and you'll see where this goes. Here's a pie chart for expense. The largest part is public safety. Legislative and executive, that's the commissioner's office, the auditor's office, the treasurer's office, the prosecutor's office, recorder's office, board elections, maintenance. So that's all legislative. So that's the second largest slice, and then judicial is 17%. And then you have smaller slices for smaller things. Miscellaneous is everything that's not included specifically ID'd as health, human services, conservation, recreation. And these are all categories I believe are established by the state auditor on the financial reports.
Human services is the Veterans Service Commission, not
Everybody hear that? Human services is the contributions we give to the Veteran Services Commission, which is typically lower $400,000 a year to help out veterans. Conservation, recreation, I believe that is that soil and water no issue?
Soil and water, no issue. And the health is not the health department. That is the state mandate that we have to fund to the Ohio Department of Health for children who are determined to have medical handicaps. We're required to appropriate a tenth of a mil, which is about $300,000. And that's the maximum that we would pay. We don't always get up to that amount, but sometimes we can.
Does that go directly to the state?
Yes.
Yep. We get monthly bills and we kind of watch and see, okay, how are we trending? I think this year we're doing pretty well in
So
terms
they
of
send us a bill and we pay for that.
every month.
And based on the need and want.
For children who are determined to have those handicaps, we're the payer of last
I
resort.
thought it was just sometimes just work.
Yep. Okay, now get your reading glasses out for this slide. Okay. This is a slide showing from 2008 to 2014 by department, actual amounts spent. Okay. You can study this at your leisure. Really, the bottom line, and again, if you say with inflation has been fairly mild that period of time, but probably the compound is probably around 15–17%. So you see some departments were successful in staying under that, and other departments weren't as successful, and there's lots of good reasons for this. The bottom line, though, I want to point out is, we did a phenomenal job, but through conservative management, all the elected officials and commissioners, of keeping our overall increase half of the general inflation rate. That's terrific, 7%. Unfortunately, what did I say our revenue's gone up during that period of time? 2.5%. How long can we continue this trend? That's an issue. This next slide gives you the same bottom line. It's simply breaking out by type of activity. So the big chunk is down here in a thing called personal services. You can see for 14, that totaled out around $18 million out of 29. So salaries and benefits is the big nut that we got to cover.
Dave?
Yes.
The benefit from the healthcare, how we use SEPCO,
Yes.
but has the administration thought about going out as a strong man to figure out whether there's other companies who could beat SEPCO's rates, or are we just assuming that SEPCO is the best, or SEPCO does it for us? And if they do it for us, are they doing it to, better their own bed, or are they actually getting statistical data that would benefit kind of somewhere down the line?
That's an excellent question, Frank. SEPCO is comprised, out of 88 counties, there's 33 counties in SEPCO. SEPCO, just like we have a thing called Corsa, you may be familiar with, which is the property casualty self-insurance pool, and I think 60, close to 70 of the 88 counties are in Corsa. SEPCO doesn't have as many counties, partly because a lot of the really large counties are self-insured. They figure we're going to take that risk, and that is our lowest way of providing health care. So when you're self-insured, you typically contract with a TPA, a third-party administrator. So you have a company that's in the business of providing health care insurance, and they just really administer your plan, but you're paying for it. You usually have like a stop-loss insurance cap. If you have a catastrophic claim, insurance will kick in, so if you're a self-insurance pool, you'll be protected from the major hits. SEPCO is kind of the best of both worlds, that you're in a pool with 32 other counties, but you're self-insured. We use Anthem, or SEPCO uses Anthem as a third-party administrator. They use Aon as their actuary, and the way our rate is calculated, they look at our actual claims, and they calculate what our premium should be based on our claims. So it's based, we're paying based on reality. But the good thing is, if there's an individual county that has a really bad claims experience, and maybe out in the private market, they might be looking like we were before we were SEPCO. I remember when I first came here, we were looking at a projected 40% increase in 1 year for healthcare. So you have a really bad claim year, you could be looking at it. And what typically would happen, we could go out and shop this, and we might be able to find a private insurer that would want to what they call buying the business. Say, you know, we've looked at their claims experience and they're pretty iffy, but we want this business, so we're going to give you this really good renewal for year one. The second year is when they base it again on actual claims, and that's when they get you. So that's the reality of it. So, and Kathy Hostupper here is the real expert on this because she does this day to day. But, you know, in answer to your question, is there a way of doing it better? Possibly, but just based on the whole concept that this is the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, that is the umbrella for SEPCO, and their whole mission is to keep costs of, you know, they're not in it to make money, you know, and they do end up, because they're very conservative too, they hold some money back, and they give rebates, and they're able to use that cushion money, that if a particular county really gets nailed, they can soften the blow on that premium increase. So they try to manage it in such a way to, over long term, give us the lowest possible costs.
Frank, let me jump in here and respond. The answer to your question is yes. And if you talk to Kathy, she will tell you that she's being questioned and SEPCO's being questioned because I'm questioning them about the very thing that you're just asking about. Is SEPCO the best answer? Is there anybody keeping them honest? And I will tell you, Kathy does a fantastic job at responding to that question and ensuring that she's asking the questions of the County Commission Association down in Ohio, who kind of is involved in this process. But the answer to your question is yes, we are questioning that. We don't take any of this for granted. And what Dave was saying, and he knows because I've challenged him on this in the office, we don't take any of this for granted. We're constantly questioning, is this the right way? Is this the best way to do this? So the answer to your question is yes, we're asking those questions.
Well, anytime you do a group impact environment is a good thing, because we're sharing the cost and sharing the penalties along the way. I was just curious, is there a chart or anything for Geauga County for our history?
We get claims history actually on a quarterly basis. In fact, someone's coming today to go over.
I would just be interested in
No.
claims history for the last 5 years since we've had something to see whether or not our claims history is going way up or way down, or staying the same.
Well, in the last 5 years, we've had single-digit renewal rates. And I think the thing with SEPCO is they have their 33 counties and they set parameters. And those parameters, even the highest parameter, is very, very usually, it is still under the national trend for healthcare increases. So their parameters are, you know, maybe 0% to 12%, and we usually, traditionally, we've been about midpoint or lower. Last year was a 6.8%. I mean, these are pretty low premiums, and I've been watching what the national trend is for renewal rates. We have consistently been under that.
Okay.
So that's kind of one indicator, I think. And like Dave was saying, if you have good years, you have bad years. Frankly, this year's not such a good year for Geauga County. Okay. And so I think it's great to be in a poll because, you know, if there's some counties that are having better years, it is going to offset that. In addition, like Dave said, SEPCO got back $1 million in rebates, and we get RX rebates and things of that nature. So from what we're looking at, and everyone is absolutely right, we are always looking at that. We are hooked to SEPCO for a 3-year contract when we sign. And if you decide to leave earlier, there is a pretty stiff penalty. But what we're seeing with the benefits that we're getting and our renewal rates, again, they've been under, you know, in a single-digit number for the last 5 years, which is pretty unusual, I think, and we've been pretty lucky about that.
If I could say too, how SEPCO's organizers, was it 15 people on the board of directors?
12 to 15.
12 to 15. And the vast majority on the SEPCO board are county commissioners. Bill Young used to be on the SEPCO board because he had all that experience from the private sector. And you know, I would encourage our board over time to maybe consider getting on there. So you have county commissioners from all over the state on this board. So again, it's not like you have a narrow group of people trying to steer this in some area for some ulterior motive. It's from throughout the state. There's a few people on the board, they're like HR directors for counties, very knowledgeable in benefits and all that. And they have Aon is their actuary. So they're the professional people looking at the actual claims experience and based on that, recommending what the premium change should be. So there's a calculated premium that is given to us based on the coverage we want to have. One of the things we have to look at every year with the commissioners, we have to look at the budget, and we have to say, okay, how much are the commissioners comfortable with absorbing in terms of a healthcare increase? Because you know there's generally, we had one year where it actually went down, but generally it goes up within single digits, but it goes up. So we set that number, and because the commissioners have supported our employees, this is our 10th year we haven't had an increase in employee contribution. Our family rate for the good plan is only $92 a month. I think if you ask around, most people are probably paying about $400 a month. So we're not able to compensate people at the level that everybody would probably think would be appropriate for all the staff. But the commissioners have done a great job in supporting, taking care of our employees in terms of benefits. And we haven't really had to cheapen the coverage. We haven't had to increase deductibles and make it more expensive as you use your health care. But this is what will happen. We'll set up whatever the commissioners are comfortable for. That'll be in the budget letter. It'll say, last year it was like, put in 12% for hospitalization. So say we do that this year, and say we're on track to not have a very good year. So, you can never say we're going to stay in single digits. Say they come back at 15%. Now, the commissioner's got to think about, are we going to finally increase the employee contribution? Are we going to increase deductibles or something to get that rate back within whatever the commissioner set for the budget guideline, where it's 12% or whatever the number is?
We've been this up for 10 years.
No.
We joined in 2008.
Okay. And do we have, do you have a statistical number that shows the average increase every year?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fixed increase in the coverage every year over the previous year.
When we signed a 3-year contract, is there a guarantee?
No.
So they could raise the rates even though.
It's all based on our own
It's all
performance.
based on actuarial numbers, I understand.
Yeah, it's based on reality.
Frank, just to give you a comfort level, and anybody that knows me and who knows that I'm a skeptic naturally.
It's hard to tell.
And ask a lot of questions. And so I had a healthcare person come in, and Kathy and I met with them last week, and we got into things pretty deeply. And the interesting thing was, and it helped me a lot to position my thinking on this, we went to detail in terms of how everything works out, what the costs are, yada, yada, yada. And they said, wow, you guys are in pretty good shape. I mean, you're paying lower rates, and we don't know how you do that. And so, for me, that helped to solidify for me what a great job Kath is doing, and that we're on safe ground. It's just a benchmark,
We
so.
also have bonus too.
And they know that, yeah, right. Sorry, Kath, you were okay until you went there. You were okay
A
until you
little
went there.
difference of opinion on the wellness issue, but it's okay.
I had some issues spending money on wellness, but go ahead.
Dave, can you go back a slide to the current situation expense?
My department?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at the change, but not the 6-year change, you go to the last 2 years, the 13 and 14.
Yeah.
There's some departments that went up by between 25 and 35%.
Yes.
And as I understand it, all departments have to have their budgets approved by the county commissioners, right?
Correct.
So it appears judiciary is a bit on a spending spree across the board. Is that a trend, or is that an anomaly that's going to be a 1-year expense? Because when you have an expenditure in the juvenile division of $1.2 million, followed by $1.6 million, that's almost $400,000. Is that $400,000 going to be there permanently, or is it a 1-year?
Just speak to that a little bit. Part of that increase is the increase to the juvenile detention center, which is found in their budget. So that was about $225,000 of that increase, which they really have no control over that.
That's
they
based
did
on
it
relative
by-
headcount between us and Portage County.
Well, typically, we try to control our expenses in each department by inflation plus maybe 1% or 2%, unless you have a specific capital project. It would appear there are numerous departments that are well past inflation plus 1 or 2.
Well, I mean, the numbers are what the numbers are. And in many cases, as Heidi just pointed out, you know, the expenditure for juvenile detention is not really something that's directly controllable. Other things are, and you ask, you know, do these numbers go away? Well, if they're for people, that number doesn't normally go away.
Whereas Geauga tells, you get a gold star.
Well, but there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And you can thank Mr. Geauga up here, because part of that is because Mr. Geauga has taken over the actual operation of the map room. And that used to be part of that spend out of the general fund to the county engineer.
And that's why I'm at 17%.
You know, the commissioners went down, all right? I'll tell you why the commissioners, good reason, the commissioners went down for 2 reasons. One, the switchboard folks used to be in the commissioner's office budget. They were transferred to Glenn. You know, if you look at maintenance, his has gone up, but considering the extra things he's taken on, I think he's done a good job of overall being fiscally responsible. We also cut our head count back in 2010 in the commissioner's office as well. But, you know, we had the ability to do that. And I guess, you know, the thing that I've enjoyed being here, you know, in my role is that most of the time we've kind of worked as a family. You know, we look at needs, and sometimes one member of the family needs more. In the case of the judiciary, they have challenges that some of us don't, or a lot of us don't face. There's things that have changed over time that may require additional spending in some areas. Change of the person running the department with different philosophies, you know, and we've tried over the years, we've tried to be accommodating and meet the needs of each elected official. But over time, you see the trend. The revenue's gone up 2.5% and the expenses are going up 7%. This cannot continue unless we do some kind of radical reorganization and find a place to cut. You know, and if anybody's got any ideas of some place we can save a couple $1 million, I'm all ears. Or we got to look at the possibility, heaven forbid, close your ears, don't skip's not listening, tax increases.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
Okay, you just approved the tax increase.
That's right. Thank you.
Where do I sign?
All right.
I brought my rubber stamp with me today, so.
Did I answer your question, Chris?
Yes, but I think it would be very healthy if this chart were to be amended to provide the annual increase, not just the first year and last year's difference.
It'd be good, and I'd love it, but the print would be really small.
We all have classes now.
That's right. Well, we can provide that. We can provide that to anybody who wants it as an Excel file, and we can do that. That's.
And then we get down to row 31, County Commissioners miscellaneous. It went up by $1.9 million in the past calendar year.
Here, I'll pass that. Pass this to Heidi right now.
Yeah, that miscellaneous includes that transfer outline item. So when we were talking about the money that was provided, actually it was about 1.4 million, a little more than 1.4 million to the engineers for that building. That's included as part of that increase.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the building. The engineer had 2 projects. I talked about the salt structure because that's part of this year's transfers out. We also fronted him the money to build his office down adjacent, right by his garage, which is going to make it a lot more productive. It's going to save us operating money from the general fund, and it's also freeing up Building 5. It can be available for other use because we have departmental needs. People need more space, and that'll allow us to not have to build a new building necessarily. So it's saving us money. And they're paying back.
Yeah, don't forget.
And the engineer is paying back actually 78% of that and of the salt stream. It's going to be over time.
Those expenses are capital expenditures. Those aren't annual expenditures, so they really need to be broken out because capital should be a one-time or a multi-year project, and then you go back to your regular expenditures.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just part of that line item because we're transferring, the money out.
Okay.
Did we make those numbers?
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at what current trends are. This first line item, what I'm trying to say here is undivided local government was cut. What we received from Columbus from the undivided local government was cut significantly And I'm not saying there's gonna keep getting cut, because it's already pretty small, but it's not coming back. We're not gonna, there's no sign they're gonna start giving us back that undivided local government money. And that was a pretty good amount of money. The state gave us casino revenue, and they kind of said, well, that would be the offset, but we don't see that as a consistent source of revenue. It might be used for things like capital projects, you know, one-time expenditures, but it's, you can't use that to replace undivided local government. Prisoner housing revenue is recovered nicely from the decline from 09 to 11, but that isn't necessarily guaranteed either, because you know, the funding of the entities that are using our jail at some point could change, and we may no longer have those that revenue coming in at any given time, and we still have to maintain that facility. Interest income is down dramatically. Mr. Hitchcock has done a wonderful job of trying to, you know, keep us getting some income, but it went from 2.4 million down to next year's around 350, 400,000.
Maybe 4.
Yeah, maybe 4. From 2.4 million. Sales tax revenue, you know, we were blessed with the construction of a couple Walmarts back in 2006 in corners of the county to add to the one we had in Bainbridge. So that really helps us a lot, because we get sales tax revenue. A lot of it is coming from citizens not living in Geauga County. So that's been a terrific help. And it's been going up consistently. You know, we budget that very conservatively. What do we have? Do you know what we have in the budget for 15? We have 12 million in the budget. We collected 13 million for 14. So that's one of the areas where we budget very conservatively, because you never know if that's going to suddenly take a turn.
Just a side note on that.
Yeah.
County collects 6.5%, sales tax.
6, 7, 5. 6 and 3/4. Remember Casey Pump?
And we only get
1%.
back.
Right.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
1%.
1% out of 6.75.
It comes out of our county and goes to the state.
So we're getting, if we're getting conservatively $12 million for 1%, if you consider a 1/4% sales tax increase, which is not that uncommon, that would be conservatively $3 million more per year to the general fund. So you look at things you might have to consider at some point. That's one that, you know, given our relative sales tax rate compared to surrounding counties, and nobody wants to do that, but that's something you look
Well,
at.
keep in mind that the state budget is only for 0.75 increase.
Right.
So that'll add on to us, and we'll still only get the 1%.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're talking about adding a 1/4% on top of that, people need to know.
Well.
And where are they gonna go?
Yeah, where are they gonna go?
Cleveland.
It's, yeah, Cleveland's already at, what, 7.75?
They're at the max.
Yeah, they're at the maximum. Yeah.
Yeah, but then unfortunately, to your point, we have a representative for that, by the way. We have a state representative and a state senator who might have some influence and impact on those decisions down at the state level, because we can impact those. So people ought to be contacting their state representative.
Property tax revenue is relatively flat. We get new construction, so we get some benefit from that, but at the same time, our Board of Revision has had to grant a lot of reductions in values where it was appropriate, where property was overvalued. So we lose some on that side. So I don't see, Frank, do you see any increase in property tax? No. No, okay.
And quite honestly, we talk a lot about where the property values, we're in a revale this year. It'll take 2 years for us to do that. But I'm seeing across the state that there's not a lot of room or wiggle room to increase property values. I mean, what the state is doing is they're increasing the farmers, the CAUB values, and they're trying to recover money from that. And that's, could be crippling some of our farmers along the way. But right now, I don't see that increase above what we've already done.
I have to put this in there just to kind of let people know, the wage increase affordability for next year is questionable at this point. Based on everything I've said, you know, once you grant a general salary increase, that is, you know, part of your budget. And you get some relief as some of us older folks at some point, you know, move on to retirement and are replaced by younger, you know, lower paid people.
And better looking.
And absolutely, that is so easy to accomplish. So I don't know, this will be up to, talk with the commissioners, what do you feel comfortable as far as the general recommended salary
We
increase?
shouldn't leave this room saying we're not getting an increase next year.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
Morale would just go right to court.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying, look at financial reality, and it has to be something, has to be considered. Again, this is one of the things I'll come back to as far as consistency and fairness. The commissioners put out a general guideline, and one of the things I've heard over the years is sometimes you'll have someone that's in charge of a department that's levy funded, and they look at their budget and they say, well, I think my people are underpaid and they ought to get pretty good increases. Well, okay, that's theoretically that's true, but do we want to live that way? Do we want to be picking winners and losers? Some people left behind, other people making out. I always thought, the morale was relatively good when we all live like a family and we all live by the same rules. And we live by the taxpayers who typically aren't getting more than 0% to 3% on a good day. That's the other thing. I think anybody that wants to demand consistently higher increases is kind of saying to the public, well, I think I'm better than you. And I don't think we want to send that message. We work for the taxpayers. We are the taxpayers. We ought to be like family and live like family together.
Just so everybody knows that every elected official in this room hasn't had a raise in the last 10 years. So whenever that comes up, it's going to put extra strain on the budget.
Absolutely.
I'm working on that. We're trying to get some more people to move into Geauga.
Yeah, we got to get you over that
Get that
95,000.
95,000 limit, so.
That'd be nice, I tried to.
Well, it didn't make sense, since we were, actually, the numbers showed higher than that, and then all of a sudden, when they did the census, they showed us lower, which didn't make a bit.
Does everybody understand that that's, the elected officials in the county are based on the population, and the next tier is at 95,000, and we didn't make it in 2010?
No, next year was 100.
No, now they're bumping it to
It was
100.
always 100, you have to get to 100 to
Oh,
get to that bottom line.
okay.
Well, how-
It was an 8%.
I haven't heard that term in a long time.
It was a nice bump. But the state's talking about, bumping elected official salary again, something, with a cost of living increase or something.
Yeah,
That's eventually going to come out of our general fund.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's overdue. Yeah.
Part of the reason, let me, you don't mind me making a brief statement real quick. Part of the reason that we're here, and hopefully you appreciate this, we're trying to have a conversation to show you what we're all up against. I mean, this is all of us, we're up against this. We got a general fund, we got to manage, and we're trying to do it responsibly. The reality is, there are members of our budget that are not departments. The courts are not a department under the county commissioners. Unfortunately, the way that the Ohio Revised Code works, they're the courts. And so, while there's a kind of a dichotomy, a conflict that goes on, because while we oversee the budget and get say in the budget, to some degree, the courts are a special creature. And so it's just part of the reality we face, and so, we have to depend on the court's adherence to what we're trying to accomplish as a county. And so that's just the reality of what we're facing, and hopefully you appreciate where we are, so.
Is there any accountability with the courts?
Ballot. Yes. I mean, there's all kinds of challenges with the courts, and I don't want to get into a whole debate or discussion this morning about what that is. But generally, the courts, and the reality of this, the courts have freedoms to do certain things relative to the budgets. And the only remedy to that is court action. And who in this room wants to get into a court action? We want to maintain harmony to the county to the extent we can.
Well, I would like to give my people a 40% raise. I think it's unconscionable to do that,
Right.
but that possibility exists because of what has happened in the court.
Yeah. That's a great discussion, debate. I'm not sure what the right answer to that is. Anybody that's got an answer to that question in this room, I'd love to hear it. But, we're here to try and talk about some of the realities that we're facing,
Well,
and
that is a reality.
so.
It is a reality. And it does impact everybody in this room, because if we're giving those types of raises to other people in other departments, it's unfair to me or everybody else who's trying to have a department that is, cost justified.
Especially when you want to attract good people and you want to keep good people, and you feel that your people are really doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, and at simply speaking for myself, and I think I speak for the other two commissioners, I don't know, they can chime in here. Everybody in the county, in all the departments, everybody that's represented here does a great job. I go in and out of all the departments all the time, and I see people do good work, and oftentimes in difficult situations.
Okay, final point on here, just, we talked about already, the benefit costs. It's inevitable with ACA and everything else that we face, they're gonna go up. But again, my personal experience is we'd be in a much worse shape if we weren't part of this.
Excuse me, Dave.
Yes.
I didn't catch you when you were on the page before that page. I just have a few questions on the current situation expense. I just wondered what compromised the line item 913 card service expense
Well, hold on.
and under other expense. And the other line item 901 other.
Other, yes, I love other.
Yeah, I mean, that is, all the departments in the general fund, there are other line items, so I'd have to give you, you know, a very detailed breakdown of what that is, and that's everyone's miscellaneous expense. The card expense, I believe, is for the departments that use, credit cards. I think that's why that line item was set up.
Well, for using the credit card, wouldn't you bill that to a direct line item rather than just a credit card expense? I mean, wouldn't it go under like maintenance or supplies or the maintenance department?
Their service fees, their service fees,
Yeah, I mean, I
credit card
guess
fees,
it
charges.
would be up to the department to set up that line item if they wanted to see that segregated.
So, excuse me, Adrian was saying that those are service fees for the credit card. Okay, I didn't think we were allowed to pay like fees, not fees, like late fees and stuff, so that doesn't include any late fees.
No, this is for receiving payments from people for credit cards.
Yeah, if you're getting money through, usually you're paying like 3% to Discover or whatever. And we collect that from the person, but then that has to be.
I
It
was
would show up in the
gonna
revenue.
chime in.
Thank you.
So for instance, in my case, what was happening is, this showed that this is what was billed by department and that money was put in, but that money has come back in. Do you understand what I'm saying? I do charge the customer, I'm allowed to under Ohio law, to the ORC to charge back the customer. So even though, for instance, if I have to pay a line item for credit cards, and I don't anymore, by the way, I changed companies, but I did, that money was coming back in. So even though that shows that that went out, for instance, you know, in my department, it was always coming back in.
Okay, so it's a revenue and an expense line.
Right.
Yeah, in my
Okay,
case it
that's what
was.
is shown in the back.
Thank you.
I want to point out something, and you can help me out with this maybe, Heidi. There's a line on here under other expense, line away utilities, it's only $250,000. I'm thinking we have a lot of utilities up in contract services and maybe in other. Right?
Yeah, everyone does it kind of differently, it's
Yeah.
not really standard, so, you know, you could, when people say, well, how much you spend on utilities, you can run that line item, but if, you know, the Department on Aging or someone else is paying it out of contract services, you're not gonna capture those costs, so you're not.
Interesting thing that we've looked at, Heidi and Skip's been part of the conversation. We looked at, we've been talking to a group called OpenGov, and they're out of the Bay Area in San Francisco. And they offer a service where they will come in, look at your financial system, and map the expenditure lines to where you want them, and they will then maintain a website that you can have available to the public, because you were talking about, you know, checkbook online.
That's Jeff Houston's program.
Yeah. So this OpenGov would actually, so you could take things like utilities and you could drill down and find those cases where, well, that utilities and other net utilities and contract services and utilities, and you could get them without having to do anything to the accounting system. You could map it so this outside system, which would be simply reading data, would have it in a way that our employees, even our citizens, could look at how we're doing. Because I know, speaking for me, I'm very proud of how this county operates, and I think we got a good story to tell. But it's hard for people sometimes, you know, especially if they looked at something like this and said, why is your utilities only $250,000? What's going on? And it does, I think it doesn't reflect as well as it should based on the excellent work we do.
David, if I could just chime in, one of the things that
you know, and I can hear the frustration in some of the different departments here as far as some of these increases, and I understand and agree that there are some major jumps as far as the judicial, the law enforcement, all of the pieces that go into that element. The reality is this, is, you know, you talk to the prosecutor, he'll explain too, you know, the numbers of cases that have grown as far as this heroin epidemic, and the number of restrictions too, that if you talk to the, you know, you talk to Judge Burt, you talk to Judge Fury, some of the restrictions that are put onto them as far as what they used to be able to do is just send people to prison. Now, there's all these different programs in place that are pretty much putting the pinch on mandates judicially that require the courts to have to do a lot of other social type of services that, at the end of the day, we've got to pay for it because it's being mandated by law. So at the end of the day, we're a land of the laws and we have to follow the law, and that's part of the situation that has put a huge burden on when you have an increase in crime and you're increasing these cases, you also have an increase on the backside of this of the costs. And, you know, I know that we're all, you know, looking at these percentages of growth, but also you got to keep in the perspective is, you know, if you look at, you know what the county recorder or county, you know, the elections, all the different departments that are here, planning commission, there's a continuous service that those departments do, and the increases as our population gets bigger, there's more stuff that those departments have to do, but we have not seen the injection of crime into, you know, in the last, say, 25 years like we have over the last 5 years with everything going on. And you know, that's, you can't discount that scenario. And sure, do I think that some of the spikes, do I agree with Mr. you know, Hitchcock, that there may be some questionable spikes in some of this? Yes. But at the end of the day, you know, we put forth the effort for the heroin epidemic, where we had to look at this and say, do we replace, you know, lives with money, or put the money in to save lives and to try to look at trying to secure our, you know, our families and our people in this county. And I think the sheriff's office is doing a great job with their enforcement. I mean, they're constantly, you know, engaged. Our prosecutors are doing a great job of prosecuting. Our judges are doing a great job of judging. And at the end of the day, you look even on the public defender, I mean, a 44% increase. Why? Because of the fact that there's more suspects and there's more criminals that are being brought into the system. And I think that, you know, further than just putting out a position of an increase on the sales tax, you know, where we're seeing the biggest burden is on the law part of this, of you know, basically, you know, on the protection part, you know, on the safety end of what we're dealing with. That's what has taken the biggest toll in our budget and continues to. And I got news for you folks, you know, across the board, it's you see all of the states, you know, crime just continues to climb, and it takes resources to handle that. You know, before we would look to and I'm speaking for myself, not the other two commissioners, but I think that the majority of the people in this county want to be in this county because they want to feel safe. They want to live in a county that they have good law enforcement, that they have good courts, and they want to be able to feel safe. I think before we go and put something forward for a sales tax increase, put it to the voters to basically come up with a safety levy. You know, that we could possibly do something that leave it to the voters to say, we want this, we want this, we want this, because of the fact that, and reduce our you know, our costs a little bit as far as what the general fund is being tasked to do. And I think that we, you know, if we were just, you know, making potatoes here and people start eating more potatoes, we could maybe continue to get more farms to produce potatoes. But when we're dealing with the criminal element, there's trends. I mean, the sheriff could probably talk about this more, and you know, the judges could talk about it, whoever can, you know, but it's a situation that it's, you know, I think that we also made a commitment, you know, at the time, and it was myself and Tracy Jemison and Mary Samiti, that we felt that spend the money now, and it's either pay now or pay how many more times later. And I think that at the end of the day, if we can put the pinch on stopping the crime now and bringing it down to a controllable level, sure, we're paying a little bit for it now, but you know something? I would rather pay now than pay with my daughter's life later, or your sons and daughters' lives later. And I think that we just have to take responsibility sometimes and just, you know something? At the end of the day, here's the thing. I'm not here to earn votes. It comes down to this, is what's common sense? I want my family to be safe. I want to be able to go to a store and not have to worry about a problem. I want to be able to go to a restaurant and not worry about a problem in this county. I think that's what we all cherish here in this county. And I think that we have to come together to understand that. But if we have to make one push, you know, and it's something that, you know, I've talked to Dave about this, you know, quite a bit, you know, to take this to potentially to the voters to say, listen, here's our situation. We want to be transparent. We're not here sugarcoating. These aren't, you know, adjusted numbers. This is what it is. If we want to be, you know, safe, and we want to continue to retain these levels of services, here's what it is. And I think part of the problem is education. You know, you talk to the majority of the residents of the county, they have no idea that our judges are basically being handcuffed of what they can make of decisions on the bench to send people to jail or not to. You know, it's you know, and you look at the red tape that our law enforcement has to go through to just prosecute people. It's a joke. The processes have made the costs skyrocket because of all the way that the laws and the procedures are set up. And unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where, you know, we just, you know, statistics don't lie. And you look at the rise of where our crime is, it's going to be inevitable. You're going to have, you know, just like your heating bill. I guarantee you your heating bill is higher this year than it was last year. Why? Because it was colder. So you had to pay more. Crime is more now than it was in 2008, so you got to pay more. So it's, at the end of the day, we just have to use a common sense approach. And I understand keep things sensible, but it's just, what do we do? Where do we draw the line? Where do we put the price on our safety? And I don't know that answer, you know?
Well, heating bill for me next year will reset to zero. Is the budget for everybody else going to be reset to zero so we can start fresh, or is this budget that's out there that we're spending today, is that just okay? We're going to continue to spend that money again next year plus a little more? That's the conversation that needs to be had. Yes, we're all concerned about safety. There's nobody in this room who will run out and say, geez, I wish my grandson or granddaughter was killed by some drug addict. Nobody wants that. But the reality is, we have to be understanding about how and where this money comes from, so we can be cognizant of what's going to happen tomorrow. Because without some solid base of how much money we need to spend, we're never going to get out of this.
And not to interrupt, but I agree with you, but the thing is you really don't know if next year they're going to reset to zero, because we could have another record year. It could be the same thing in crime. All of a sudden, the new designer drug comes up, and now what do we face?
If I spend $700 or $800 on to heat my house, next year, come wintertime, I'm at zero. I haven't spent a dime yet.
I understand that.
But in this environment, I'm going to spend all the money I have this year, and I want that same amount of money for next year, and I'm going to spend that, plus I want you to give me some more. That concept can't go on.
So what is the answer, Frank? What is the answer?
I think the people have to get together to figure out how to resolve the issue. I mean, I've talked to the sheriff on a number of occasions. We need to get, I mean, we just gave $300,000 to start this process, and now you look at those budget numbers, they're pretty high. They're pretty high, and I know, by the way, there's not another department in the county that gets more mandates than me. Okay? And I have to address those without adding staff, without asking for additional money. We just absorb the time and effort from the county. JFS does the same thing. Netzenbaum does the same thing. All have to absorb those mandates. The mandates are a part of my life and part of everybody in this room's life. Because we have to do with, we're creatures of statute, and we have to fix these problems. I don't have the answer. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting in this room right now. I'd be somewhere else.
Yeah, I would like to comment on that. I happen to think Geauga County is special. That's why I've lived here 67 years. But we're not unique. I mean, other counties have these increases in crime as well. And as Ralph said, statistics don't lie. I don't entirely agree with that because you can move numbers around in any direction you want, but for the most part. And data was assembled by the Commissioner's Office, primarily Mr. Lair, with regard to surrounding counties and their expenses and increases in expenses in court costs, in law enforcement costs. And every chart that I saw, we were number one. You know, we were the highest in increases.
Were we the highest in increased crime? Increased case counts?
I don't believe we were, but I will not go to the electric chair on that one. But I believe everybody has this increase in crime. I mean, when I say everybody, I mean Lake County, Trumbull County, Ashtabula County, Cuyahoga County, and percentage-wise, which county? Who did we do? Who did you do? What counties?
Well, and this is a fairly narrow study. This was
Right.
Lake and Ashtabula and Trumbull and Portage.
All right, 4 counties that are
Close to us.
closest to us and in
Relatively similar size.
similar, right. And I believe at that time we were, like I said, number one. I think our costs judicially went up higher than anyone else.
And again, that was an analysis of general fund contributions to the courts. If these other courts had special revenue funds and there was increases that were happening in those that weren't happening in ours,
Yeah, we didn't see
we
that.
didn't look at all that.
It was just general fund money.
Right.
Well, and I think that part of that too, that was, part of that, if you look through those numbers, there were a lot of those costs that were deferred, that were paid within different funds of the county commissioners. So if you actually looked at, the costs of what, say, Lake County in their common police court does, there was a lot of other line items that were distributed through a different expense account that wasn't really directly related to the way that they had their stuff.
Everybody does it different.
It was so I mean, in fairness to us, I can't see that Geauga County would have probably the cost of what a Lake County would have, just based on their population and on their cases.
Can I intervene real quick? For instance, in my office, I can say we had probably about an 80% increase in criminal cases in a couple of years, which is pretty astronomical for Geauga County, and it was very disheartening. But at the same time, I can tell you, a few years ago, when we had such an increase in foreclosures and domestic violence, that case, I can, and I'm only speaking for my office, not the judge's office, but I can tell you it was easy to shift because the increase in foreclosures, that has leveled off and it has gone down. So with the increase in criminal cases, for instance, in my office, we were able to shift when that manpower was all needed for the foreclosures and domestic violence, it is now going to criminal because that's where we've had the big increase. So, I didn't have to hire any more employees or put forth, have to spend a lot more money as far as that goes because, we were able to put the employee workers to work on the criminal cases and since the foreclosures have gone down, so.
I think we just need to look at the reasonableness of all this. The common pleas court only had a 22% increase.
Right.
Why juvenile and probate such huge increases? The municipal court went down. The sheriff's office, only 9%. So, I mean, when you take that all out, I think we're kind of top heavy, and I think we need to kind of look at, I mean, we don't, you guys do, look at. being
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? We'll get, I'll wrap it up here pretty soon, because let's get you out of here in one more than 90 minutes. Okay, we're looking at what our debt situation is here. This is our current debt. This is general fund related debt. We made a payment on our debt. We refinance every year with short-term notes. This has saved us a tremendous amount of money in interest over the years. So in August 2014, we paid down a total of $1 million on our outstanding note that was maturing. $750,000 of that went to the safety center. So that was August 2014. We paid off a safety center that just opened in December of 2005. Very conservative fiscal management. The other $250,000 of the $1 million we were able to pay down went toward our radio upgrade, our Earth radio. This leaves a balance of $3 million on the radio, and we have put in, we've recommended, we put in a supplemental appropriation to pay that down like $500,000, the idea being able to get that paid down within 6 years. When you issue notes, you save a lot of money, but you gotta pay off the debt that you're incurring for the note. You gotta pay it off within 10 years or you gotta bond it out. So that's we're limited there. So we can issue new notes, but it's gotta be for new things. So when I sit down here, and this is again, subject, the board has to think about this and come to some consensus, is that we can take, and I use JFS as an example. We have an outstanding debt on the JFS building expansion, which was many years ago, and it was stretched over a long period of time. We're down to about $330,000 left on that debt. We have to completely redo their parking lot this year. That's $100,000 plus. We have to put an air conditioning unit in for their computer center. That'll be $40,000 or $50,000. So just to use that as an example, you could do like a home equity refi and say we're going to issue $500,000 of whatever notes we issue might be to consolidate that under one issue that we then pay off in 10 years. Similarly, the salt structure I talked about for the engineer, that could be put in that financing. So under this scenario, we could be paying down $500,000 and get the debt down to 2.5, but actually issue $1 million in new debt. So our debt would actually go from $3 million to 3.5, but it would be tracked separately. So that's a way we can preserve cash to meet the challenges that we have to meet out of our general fund and have it handled. We need to have a consensus on that relatively soon because Frank has to get with our debt expert and look at issuing notes for whatever the commissioners decide they want to do. Any questions on that?
David?
Yes.
Frank, just for a refresher, in the way that the county finances projects with the notes, what are we paying in our annual interest rate?
Last time it was 0.04 something.
0.04%.
That's phenomenal.
$25,000 in interest and borrow $3 million.
Okay.
So that was a significant amount of money. Significant.
I wanted to mention that because anyone who has the impression that we act irresponsibly, and when I say we, I'm just over here on the side, you people who work for the county and do this. I mean, that's big savings, that's significant. And I think you guys deserve a hearty thank you for doing that, because if we went out with bond debt, it would be significantly more, and I don't think that gets pointed out.
Well, I say that every year when I come before the commissioners and tell you what we're saving, and I tell you what we have done after we've done the bonds. Like David said, we saved $1.2 million by paying the notes off in less time. Had we gone for a bond, it would have been 20 years, we would still be paying out of that. And we would a huge chunk of interest on that, and it's better to do it the way we're doing it. We're very cautious, we're very, I applaud the commissioners for putting away some $500,000 at a click. And I think that's vitally important, and we should look at other opportunities like the salt building and see what that's actually gonna cost us, and maybe we can roll it in, but I haven't even had that conversation.
Well,
We need to have that conversation.
in addition to the JFS facility, anyone who works in this facility who remembered going home because you couldn't flush the toilets needs to understand that that parking lot right out very close to us is going to have some major work done to it this year. If you drive by one of the culverts or catch basins, they're all about a foot lower than the pavement, so something's going to have to be done as well, and I don't know where that money's coming
We're
from.
fixing the market parking lot, so I think that's.
Dave,
Yes,
can I clarify
Absolutely.
something about GFS?
please.
You guys have to front the money for
Right.
us, but you will be getting
We
all
get
that.
that back, that's right. Thank you for adding that.
Yes.
Just like the engineer's paying us back 78% of the money we fund
Unfortunately,
him.
because of laws, auditors, we have to do it this way.
Yeah, and we found this out a number of years ago, yeah. No, the federal government loves our grandchildren to pay for things we buy. So part of the funding mechanism, the way that we can be reimbursed for JFS improvements, you gotta stretch it over a long period of time. So we can minimize our interest costs, and then we get paid back over a longer period of time. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, path forward. Let me get through this. We're gonna have the letter, the dreaded letter that I will be sending out very soon now. Just basically saying it's time to start putting your 2016 numbers into New World. And the commissioners have to adopt the tax budget before July 15th. We will have our budget hearings. The goal is to have the budgets, all the hearings done before Halloween. That's our internal goal in our office. Then the commissioners have time to look at and decide about what's going to be in the permanent appropriation. You always try and adopt that permanent appropriation in December, so that you have time to get the purchase orders in and we can get a good start in the new year. In early 2016, the cycle begins. The Budget Commission certifies the carryover revenue, and we start the new year. And then the supplemental appropriations, where the commissioners look at what was asked for, the budget hearings are considered, and we appropriate those in the general fund. Path forward, if we're going to stay as successful as we've been, we have to work as a team. We have to share in our sacrifice. We have to share in the rewards of that sacrifice. We have to collaborate. We have to innovate. This is a favorite of mine, is you say, you know, our general compensation level is not where we want it to be. Well, how do you solve that problem on limited funds? Well, you solve it when, you know, baby boomers like me start getting out of the way, and you let the younger folks take over, and you give them the education you need, you give them the technology you need, so they become more productive. And over time, you know, I think most Geaugans would agree that the purpose of Geauga County government is not to employ people, it's to get stuff done. So over time, the goal would be to have fewer county employees, but they would be better trained, better paid. That would be, at least, I think that's, most well-run organizations are always driving toward that goal. At least that's my bias for it. We want to look at the idea of doing a salary profile. This is where, again, you get some outside expert who does this for a living to come in and do job analysis for positions and try to come up with pay ranges for equivalent positions throughout the county. So everybody feels like if I'm working for this elected official, I'm on the same pay range as my counterpart over here working for this elected official doing similar work. Now, that takes cooperation from the elected officials who want to buy into that. Commissioners can do it in our hiring authority, and hopefully will, for it to have real value though, and to really maintain morale amongst all county employees. If we want to be like a family, we have to be buying into this idea that we're going to look at some outside person doing an objective evaluation to make sure our employees are fairly paid compared to people in other counties of similar size. Remember, larger counties pay more. That's the way it works, doing similar work.
Dave, we did that, how long ago?
Well, the last real one was done before I was there. It was done around 2000. It was Maximus DMG.
And all the elected officials have to agree so that their departments will be included in that.
Yeah, we can't force that on the elected.
So it would be possible for some elected officials to say, you know, we're good.
Yeah,
I'll just journalize, we're good.
that's entirely possible.
Okay.
Just had to have it up there as a goal. That would be nice. 5-year budget standard, when, if we can get that into the new world where the users, we say, okay, put in your 2016 budget like you always do, and then put in some assumptions and some projections for the next 4 years beyond that, if it's possible to do. It's not really something we can do just in our office because there's too much detail there and we don't know the assumptions. That gets everybody kind of thinking about, okay, what happens? When am I going to need my next levy? When is the money going to run out, or when am I going to have this change in law that's going to cause some kind of impact on my budget? You start thinking longer range, and you're able to head off the problems before they become. Finally, we're going to, in our office, we're going to look at undertaking a facility study. Right now, we have 3 campuses. We have down at the center of the county by Ravenwood and Merritt, where the buildings are mostly in good shape, and there's land to grow and all that, but that's not in the county seat. And a lot of things statutorily, unless the laws change, have to be in the county seat. So now you're left in the city of Chardon, you have what's up on the square with all those classic buildings that Glenn loves so well. And then you have this high quality.
You should avoid it.
Yeah. Then you have 470 Center Street. So we own, in case any of you aren't aware of this, the county owns 35 acres at the very south end of the city of Chardon, within the city of Chardon. It's right across from that little park district park. So if you don't know where that's at, there's a place called Caracor, and there's a bunch of pine trees, and then there's a sign, welcome to Chardon. That group of pine trees, that's the frontage for the county's 35 acres. That was bought back in 2007, 2008 for $750,000. It was evaluated over $1.1 million. So it was a very good investment to be made. So there's room there to put a consolidated facility, consolidated courts, consolidated administration. It would be 1 traffic light 5 minutes away from the other county offices. So on the surface, that sounds pretty appealing, but that's not a good enough reason just to jump ahead and do it. We have to do a facility study. We have to look at what it costs us to maintain these buildings. We have to look at the productivity losses from physically moving all around. It's hard to collaborate when you've got to get in your car and go through 5 traffic lights to get to that person you want to collaborate with. But that may not be a good enough reason to do it. We have to run the numbers and see whether it makes sense.
Can I interject something? I want to recognize Debbie Ranker. She's our court IT. She has secured a loan. Not a loan, a grant, Supreme Court, and we will be moving forward with electronic filing, which will help us in the long run.
Our mail cost this year was down, it was around $200,000. It's been an election year, it's around $240, $250, something like that, I think. And that's a huge amount of money, and I really applaud courts because they're so paper intensive doing what they can to be efficient.
Well, this electronic filing is going to help a lot. I was looking into the future, thinking if the population keeps growing, what am I going to do for more employees as far as have to start a second shift? There's no more room in the courthouse, yada yada. I was trying to think outside the box, and I think this is really going to help us a lot. It isn't going to eliminate the work that employees have to do, but it will reduce it. So hopefully, we will not have to hire more employees with electronic filing. It's the way of the future. Some of the larger counties are electronic filing. The Supreme Court is going in that direction. Of course, federal court has been doing that for years. So we're really pleased, and I have to thank Debbie. She put a lot of hard work into this. It's going to be great for us.
Okay, well, we're over the hour-and-a-half promised or threatened. I'm happy to stay as long as, but I don't want to go off. Are there any other questions? And Commissioner, would you like to?
I just have one question, or 2 questions actually. It's one question, 2 parts. Dave introduced the concept of a salary standard, so to speak, across the county if we do it cooperatively. How many people are being paid for that?
I don't know what it means, I'm sorry.
I've been involved in it once before, and I will never do it again unless there is something that convinces me otherwise. It was very, very demeaning to my office staff. I don't know if the clerk of courts has a negative connotation because of the clerk, but they literally gave us the.
That is a problem. It's
The
a very
dumb down
unfortunate
of pushing paper,
Yeah.
and I mean,
I
it
agree.
was very upsetting to me, so
Yeah,
that was back in 1999.
89, it was late
Eight or
90s.
something like that.
It was
yeah.
before 1999, because it was right before I
Well,
started.
I think if I can,
1998, and
Yeah.
like I said, unless something changes dramatically.
I think we want to have a collaborative group where we can interview people who do that, and their approaches, because no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything like that. I was so upset.
my question would be, was that a problem that was unique to the process? Or was that a problem that may have been unique to the people conducting the process? And that would be very frustrating to me, that anybody that we would employ would look down on any employee in the county as being less important or inferior, or, you know, what you do isn't as important as what Dan does or Frank or we do. That would not be something I would be in favor of, and I would, if we were to go this route, and if I was sitting in this chair, I would strive very hard to find a firm that understood that it takes everybody to get this job done and to keep this running, and that the person at the bottom of the chart is as integral as the person at the top.
I don't know.
That would be my, you know, I would not be interested in someone that was.
Our job descriptions, I couldn't have gone overboard, any more overboard with our job descriptions. And of course, you know, they had to be comparable with the courts. And of course, you know, many employees from the court get paid much more than my employees. And basically they said life isn't fair, which is true. But, you know, it was just, you know, it was not a good experience. And I spent extra hours with them after hours in the evening. And, you know, they literally, I think with our timestamp machine, had a vision of us just literally timestamping documents and standing there. That's basically, so I really don't know if, you know, the answer to your question, if it would be the firm or if it was, you know, in general, but I can tell you, you know, throughout the state, I don't think that there's a very high, for most of the office workers that do paperwork, I don't think that there's a very good,
I mean, Denise, the thing I've seen over 11 years of budget hearings, or 10 years, is that we get 30-plus departments that come in and sit in the commissioner's office, and every single one of them says with conviction, our people are the hardest working, most dedicated, and that's, you know, they all believe it, and none of us is in a position to be able to objectively judge relative workload, expertise, whatever. You need somebody from the outside to kind of look at that, and because otherwise, if you do it internally, it's favoritism. Somebody's going to feel like, oh, they got a bias.
Because there's a lot of benefits associated with, and I've worked with, I can't even count the number of companies, but I've worked with those who have put in place a salary standard, saw so much benefit out of that, because you don't have one group looking at another group, and you got all this internal competition. Just, I mean, you go through a litany of benefits associated with it. And I guess the point that I would make is that I ask you to keep an open mind to this, is it would be collaborative. Look, we all want the same objective and goal. We want people paid fairly for the job that they do. We want, you know, hardworking people that are willing to put in the time, but we want them treated fairly. We want good benefits. We got great benefits with Kathy right now. But being able to have that salary standard helps us not to have some of the discussions we're having right now about, oh, this department, oh, that department, and so on and so forth. And so if we can find a way to work through that, I think we'd see a lot of benefits of it at the end of the day. Now, it requires cooperation. I mean, I can't force the auditor's department or the clerk's department, whoever, to cooperate, but I can ask you to come to the table and have a discussion, and let's see if we can't work it out, because there's so many benefits, potentially, that would come out of that. And so if you're open-minded to that, it's a thought.
I'm on the outside here, the DD board. Every year we have a salary survey that's done throughout the state. It's done by our association. So we know how we compare to the neighboring counties in equal positions. We're not trying to say my secretary versus your secretary versus your secretary. But I know I can monitor every year, basically, how our people rank in positions in comparison to others. Do you guys have similar things like that? Do you have associations where you're asking those questions every year and comparing how you compare?
Good question.
We have a,
Safety Owners Association has to tap into.
I'm at least comparing ourselves, and then I just asked Ron, one of the letters I handed to Ron here is, can you give me an idea of positions? I monitor that. I'm not necessarily I'm with you. I'm not sure that I want to be held to an idea that this is the standard, because I have to compete for different people. Our case managers get certainly paid more than the JFS case managers. Whoever from JFS is here certainly know that. Karen, your staff are different than ours in our direct care line, those type of things. But at the same time, we constantly consider that as we're setting our ranges and our salaries and where we stack up.
well, it's the same thing that, I think there's a lot of people that can attest to here, a lot of the good employees have gone to Lake County, they've been more money in Lake County, and they can't enjoy it.
With the farm
And
team.
they've been great employees, and it's really sad to lose those employees, it really is. And I don't want to lose employees, I lost an employee to the employee, so, and I finally said, hey, I have to compete, I don't want to lose these good people, I want them to stay, it doesn't do any good for my office, so it's not a benefit to keep training employees, and we spend 2 years to get an employee on board, and they go to another department, so.
Well, thank you all for coming. And hopefully you've seen some benefit out of today. The office is always open for private conversations and so hopefully you've seen some benefit out of it. Thank you.